So an odd year, but we're at Degree Show again. So how have the finalists coped this year?
Well, it's been very strange because until really the last few weeks we weren't even sure that there was going to be a Degree Show, and last year we didn't have one at all. So we haven't really prepared students for there being a Degree Show. So for me it's a bit of a bonus that we're going to have something. The fact that it's online possibly favours the kind of work that our students do, because they make films and they can probably best be appreciated on a screen rather than usually we do some kind of exhibition, and that's a bit out of place for filmmakers. So.
Kind of did like two main ones. One which was as a documentary about disability representation in cinema, and another which was we intended on filming it, but obviously 2020 kind of messed that up. So I ended up doing it as an animatic instead. Like that was like a short horror movie that I did.
So talk to me a little bit about that documentary. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So myself and one of my friends both like got disabilities of different kinds. Like mine's less visible, hers is more physical. So we wanted to go and like speak to a bunch of different people with disabilities about like what about how films choose to like represent people with disabilities, and get them to talk about it rather than listening to someone who doesn't have that kind of thing. Want to kind of let them speak about the things that affect them with their own voice. So we like arranged a bunch of interviews over Zoom and interviewed a bunch of people, and like it was quite a lot of fun. It turned out really well, I think.
So no, for me.
No, not really. I think there is some representation, but there isn't enough.
It ends up being exactly the opposite. I feel like deeply not represented.
Certain narratives tend to be told about disabled people. Some so the two typical stereotypes are the disabled person who people tend to pity, who they feel sorry for, and then the second stereotype tends to be somebody who kind of overcomes the disability.
And what were your findings? What was the?
It was like a unanimous terrible, just never any, like there was a couple of snippets of a few films every now and then, some things you wouldn't expect, like Winnie the Pooh we found was like somehow quite good for some like representation, but then majority of the time awful ones, like the new music by Sia, like that was a big one, that was a lot of problems. So we kind of went like through just a bunch of different ways just of how it just messed up and all like things. It was
How old were you and why did you get into football?
So I was about 4 when I first started kicking a football, and it was mainly because of my brother. So my older brother, so he was already like part of a sort of soccer school, they used to call it, and it used to just be something in the summer. So it's kind of like saves your mum and dad worrying about finding someone to look after you. So we just got sent to these soccer camps for the day and ended up like loving it. And I was actually quite good, so I just carried on from there really.
Well, I was kicking the ball around in the garden with my dad, and my dad was like showing me a few. Well, I wasn't showing me, he was just messing around with the ball. Didn't think I would be interested in football because I'm a girl, blah blah blah. I started like copying him. Apparently he went indoors, started cooking, and then he looked out and I was copying what he was trying to do. I loved it, so started looking for actual proper club teams to play for. My dad didn't know about academies at that point, so it was probably too soon anyway, but obviously I went into my first team was Marston Green. But I think I was the age of like, started playing about 9 and I probably went to a team about 10.
I think it has been really challenging for all our students to try to get as much work done from a journalistic perspective under the current circumstances. So I think one of the most interesting elements of this year production is how they have been able creatively to gather news and stories using technology and remote ways to actually shoot scenes, do interviews, etc., etc. So I think one of the most relevant elements of those pieces are the skills that our students have been developed to work in a really challenging and extreme circumstances that they're not actually able to meet people and to interview people in the traditional way we journalists usually do.
And I suppose in just the same way that journalists working in the real world have had to adapt very quickly, students are in exactly the same position.
Absolutely. Several of our practitioners that come here and do work with our students has been actually taught them how they can adapt to these challenging scenarios where you can use technology to. You're not going to replace face-to-face interaction, but you can actually help to shorten distances between people. So I think that has been one of the main topics that our students have been discussing in their news days and production days that we have been running during the whole academic year.
So I decided to do a podcast around mental health during COVID-19 because I feel like the impact of COVID and mental health have genuinely risen during lockdowns, and a lot of people have suffered, but a lot of people have also suffered in silence. So originally I wanted to do a TV project because obviously I'm passionate about TV, and obviously given the circumstances I just wouldn't have been able to have got my interviews how I wanted them and pieced everything together. So I decided to do a podcast. Got secured more interviews than what I actually needed because there was a lot of people that. One of my main concerns was people not opening up to me, but people actually did open up to me, and as you get in there you kind of get an insight behind their life, and you realise some people have really, really suffered. So I decided to do a podcast around mental health, and I'm actually really proud of it because I've really enjoyed putting it together.
Fantastic. But you have made some TV work as well.
Yeah, so obviously I've made a lot of TV work, always been passionate. Obviously I've spent a lot of time in the studio presenting these cameras and things like that, reading from them. We present the news, I've put lots of care home packages together. I have done, I think there was fly tipping packages. Obviously when I first started, obviously I was learning, so I wasn't, but come level 5 it just felt natural to me, and piecing it together was just like what I do best, and learning things like on level 4 there was like always somebody that used to help me. Come to level 5 I was like, no, I've got this, like I can do this, and yeah, I've just pieced it together naturally. I really enjoy putting it together.
For many families across England who have relatives in care homes, it's been very difficult for them to see their families for almost a year. With the upcoming reopening of care homes on Monday the 8th of March, just how are the families feeling? 24-year-old Harry Jenkins, whose twin suffers with severe autism, explains what it's like in the build-up to see his brother Ben.
So as soon, the care home that he's in is amazing. As soon as Boris did that speech, they said, look, you know, you guys are more than welcome to come over, let's start arranging visits. But we are a little bit apprehensive just because Ben lives with 2 people who are very high risk. And me and Mum just thought it might be a bit selfish of us to go waltzing in, you know, and put these 2 lads he lives with, because I know one for a fact is, you know, he's got several conditions that he, you know, and we just thought, you know, I'm sure we can wait a month, because I just don't think it would be very fair going to see and potentially putting this little lad at risk. So, you know, obviously we're pleased that we can go and see him, but we're just going to hold out for another month or so, I think.
With almost 70 care homes in the Wolverhampton area alone, people like Harry Jenkins is not alone in facing this dilemma, where young people with severe disabilities like autism have to be climatised back to their families. When that time comes, there's no doubt it will be a happy time for the families who have had a year of waiting. Rachel Carlos for the University of Wolverhampton Student News.